A group of friends decides to spend their summer in an old abandoned mansion in the remote village of Hollow Grove. As they start to uncover the mansion's dark history, marked by a series of mysterious disappearances and gruesome murders, they realize that something malevolent still resides within its walls. Tensions rise and paranoia sets in as they struggle to escape the mansion's grip before it's too late. Main characters: Jessica Marshall, the brave and resourceful leader of the group; David Turner, the skeptical and rational thinker; Laura Mitchell, the sensitive and easily frightened artist; Brian Sullivan, the strong and protective athlete; Emily Clark, the curious and intelligent history buff. Jessica Marshall glanced at the peeling map in her hands, and then back at the looming structure before her. The mansion rebuked their presence with an eerie silence, its windows sealed with an accumulation of grime that seemed to have been untouched for decades. "This has to be it," she murmured, more to herself than to her companions. David Turner, always the skeptic, adjusted his glasses and frowned. "Are we sure about this? Old abandoned mansions never end well in horror movies." "Relax, David," Brian Sullivan smirked, clapping David on the back. "It's just an old house. What's the worst that could happen?" Emily Clark unlocked the rusting gate with a creak that seemed to echo through the entire property. "According to local legend, this place used to belong to the Hollow family," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "They all vanished mysteriously about 70 years ago." Laura Mitchell shivered and instinctively gripped Brian's arm. "Do we really have to go inside?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Come on, guys," Jessica said with a reassuring smile. "We can't turn back now. We promised ourselves an adventure, remember? Let's just get settled in." As they stepped inside, the musty air seemed to cling to their skins, and the temperature dropped noticeably. The grand foyer stretched out before them, its marble floors cracked and dusty but still holding remnants of its former grandeur. Jessica moved towards the sweeping staircase, noting the intricate carvings on the banister. "This place must have been beautiful once," Emily said, her eyes wide with wonder. "Imagine the stories these walls could tell." "Stories I'm not sure I want to hear," David muttered, still unconvinced. As they explored the mansion, they found rooms filled with antique furniture, forgotten books and eerie portraits watching them with lifeless eyes. But it was the discovery in the basement that set their adventure on a thrilling, terrifying course. Emily was the first one to find the trapdoor, hidden beneath a dusty old rug. "Hey everyone, look at this!" she called out excitedly. The group gathered around as Brian heaved the creaking door open, revealing a dark staircase leading down into the bowels of the mansion. A sense of dread hung heavily in the air as they descended, their flashlights casting flickering shadows on the damp stone walls. When they reached the bottom, they found themselves in a cold, cavernous room lined with ancient, rotting wooden shelves. Disturbingly, chains hung from the walls, and strange symbols were etched into the stone floor. "What is this place?" Laura whispered, her voice cracking with fear. "I don't know," Jessica replied, trying to sound braver than she felt. "But I have a feeling we're about to find out." As they stood there, the atmosphere growing more oppressive by the second, a distant, disembodied whisper echoed through the room. The hair on the back of Jessica's neck stood on end, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were no longer alone. They didn't yet realize that their summer had become a descent into unimaginable horror, and that the malevolent force trapped within the house had now been awakened. Feel free to continue developing the plot and adding more chapters to reach your desired word count. If you need further assistance or specific scenes written, just let me know. The next morning, the sun's weak rays filtered through the mansion's grime-covered windows, casting an eerie glow over the dusty interior. The group gathered around the grand dining table, an assortment of breakfast items spread out before them. The events of the previous night weighed heavily on their minds. "We need to figure out what we found in the basement," Jessica said, breaking the silence. "Those symbols, I've never seen anything like them." Emily nodded, her eyes dark with curiosity. "I think we should try to research them. There might be books or old records somewhere in the house." David, always the logical one, frowned. "Before we get too deep into this, let's make sure we're safe here. That place gave me the creeps." Brian agreed. "Let's stick together, make sure we have our phones with us, and don't go anywhere alone." With a plan in place, the group split up to search the mansion for any clues that might explain the mysterious basement. Jessica and Emily headed to the library, while David and Brian examined the old study, and Laura, despite her reluctance, agreed to check the attic. The library was a labyrinthine room filled with towering bookshelves crammed with dusty tomes. Jessica sneezed as she brushed away a layer of dust from a shelf. "There's got to be something here," she said, pulling out an ancient leather-bound book. The title had faded into obscurity, but as she opened it, she saw it was filled with detailed sketches of ancient symbols. similar to those in the basement. "Look at this," she exclaimed, showing it to Emily. "This could be exactly what we need." Emily's eyes widened. "Let's look for anything that talks about the Hollow family or this house." In the study, David ran his hand over an old mahogany desk, searching for anything useful. "There has to be something here that explains why that basement exists," he said. Brian rummaged through a set of drawers, finally pulling out a dusty file. "Look at this. It's filled with old letters and documents." As they read through the papers, they uncovered correspondences between the Hollow family and various occult organizations from the early 20th century. The letters hinted at secret rituals and hidden chambers within the mansion. Laura hesitated at the foot of the attic stairs, mustering the courage to go up. The attic was a dark, musty space filled with forgotten artifacts covered in cobwebs. As she moved deeper into the room, her flashlight beam caught something glinting under a pile of old clothes. She uncovered an ornate, locked wooden box. She tried to open it but was unsuccessful. Determined to find answers, Laura decided to take the box back downstairs to the group. As the friends reconvened in the library, Laura placed the box on the table. "I found this in the attic," she said. "It's locked, but it looks important. We found a lot of information about the Hollow family and their connection to some kind of occult practices," David explained, spreading the letters and documents on the table. "It seems they were involved in some pretty dark stuff." Jessica held up the old book she and Emily had discovered. "And we found this. It might help us understand the symbols in the basement." Emily took out her phone, snapping pictures of the symbols from the book and comparing them to the sketches they had made in the basement. "These symbols are linked to summoning rituals," she said, her voice shaking with a mix of fear and excitement. "I think the Hollows were trying to summon something." At that moment, a sudden chill filled the room, and the air grew heavy. A soft whispering began again, more insistent this time, as if urging them to leave while they still could. "We need to be very careful," Jessica said, her eyes fixed on the group. "Whatever they were summoning, I think it's still here. And it's not happy." The reality of their situation began to set in, and they realized that they were dealing with forces far beyond their understanding. The haunting of Hollow Grove had only just begun, and they had inadvertently become its latest victims. The oppressive atmosphere persisted throughout the day, casting a shadow over their every move. The group had set up a makeshift research station in the library. The table now covered in ancient tomes, old letters, and sketches of arcane symbols. The locked box sat ominously among them, begging to be opened. As the day waned into evening, the usual hum of conversation was frequently punctuated by uneasy glances toward the library door, half expecting it to swing open on its own. "We have to find a way to open this box," David said, tapping it thoughtfully with his fingers. "If it was hidden in the attic, it might contain something important. Maybe we should try to force it open," Brian suggested. Laura frowned. "What if there's something inside that can help us understand what's going on? We need to be careful." Jessica, who had been poring over the books of symbols, perked up suddenly. "Wait a minute. There might be a key or some other mechanism in the house. These old mansions often have hidden compartments." "It's worth a shot," Emily agreed. "Let's split up again and search for anything that might help us open the box. This time stick together in pairs." Jessica and Brian cautiously explored the drawing room, checking behind paintings and searching through ornate cabinets. As Brian swept a candlestick off a shelf, a loud clunk echoed through the room, followed by the wall shifting slightly. "Did you see that?" Jessica whispered, eyes wide. Brian nodded, pushing the candlestick further. A hidden panel slid open to reveal a small, dusty cupboard. Inside was a brass key, intricately carved with symbols similar to those in the basement. "I think we found our key," Brian said, holding it up triumphantly. Meanwhile, David, Emily, and Laura searched the conservatory, where neglected plants had overgrown their pots and creepers twisted around the furniture. As Emily inspected a tattered old armchair, she noticed something glinting between the cushions, a small folded piece of parchment. "Look at this," she said, handing it to David. He unfolded it to reveal a crude map of the mansion, with a section marked Hidden Chamber near the basement. "This could be important," he said, sharing the parchment with Laura. "It might explain the basement's purpose." Laura ran her fingers over the map. "If that chamber is down there, it might give us more answers. We should check it out once we get the box open." Reunited in the library, Brian held up the key. "We found this in a hidden compartment. Think it's the right one." David placed the parchment next to the locked box. "We also found a map. It mentions a hidden chamber near the basement. We should investigate it after we get the box open." Emily clasped her hands nervously. "Let's do it. The sooner we understand what's in the basement, the better." With meticulous care, Jessica inserted the brass key into the ornate lock. With a soft click, the box opened to reveal a collection of old photographs, a leather journal, and a small vial of dark liquid. These photos, Laura said, flipping through them. They showed various members of the Hollow family standing in front of strange symbols and ritualistic circles, their faces solemn and intense. David opened the journal, his brow furrowed as he read aloud. The chamber must remain sealed. The entity can never be allowed to escape. He looked up, his face pale. I think they were trying to contain something, not summon it. The realization sent chills through the group. The whispers seemed to grow louder, echoing their growing dread. We have to get to that hidden chamber, Jessica said firmly. We need to know what we're dealing with. And if it's something dangerous, we need to find a way to stop it. Hearts pounding, they steeled themselves for their journey back to the basement, the forgotten key to the mansion's dark history now in their hands. Unbeknownst to them, the very act of uncovering these secrets had stirred the shadows of Hollow Grove, awakening an old malevolent force that had lain dormant for decades. The descent back into the basement felt more ominous this time. Armed with the key and the knowledge from the journal, they moved with a heightened sense of urgency. The lanterns they carried cast flickering light on the stone walls, making shadows dance in the corners of their vision. The map led them to an otherwise inconspicuous section of the basement wall. David traced the symbols engraved into the stones with his fingers, his touch activating a hidden mechanism. A section of the wall slid open, revealing a narrow passageway. This must lead to the hidden chamber, Emily whispered, gripping her lantern tighter. They moved single file down the corridor, the air growing colder with each step. At the end of the passage, an iron door loomed, covered in the same arcane symbols they had seen throughout the house. The door radiated a palpable sense of foreboding. Brian inserted the brass key into the lock. As it turned, the air seemed to vibrate, the ancient mechanism protesting before it gave way with a groan. The door swung open, revealing a dark cavern illuminated by a faint supernatural glow. The chamber was vast, its floor inlaid with intricate patterns. At the center stood a stone altar, on which rested an obsidian amulet pulsating with dark energy. Around the altar, symbols glowed faintly, forming a circle of containment. That must be the entity they were trying to keep locked away, Laura said, her voice barely above a whisper. David carefully approached the altar, journal in hand. The journal mentioned that the chamber must remain sealed. We need to find a way to strengthen the containment. As they examined the altar and the chamber's inscriptions, Jessica noticed that the vial of dark liquid they had found fit into a small depression on the altar. She hesitated but then placed the vial into the indentation. The symbols immediately flared to life, brightening and shifting in their patterns. "It's working," she exclaimed, but their relief was short-lived. The ground began to tremble and a low growl emanated from the walls. "We must have disturbed it," Brian yelled. "We have to complete the ritual," Emily shouted over the increasing noise. "The journal should have instructions." David flipped frantically through the journal, stopping at a heavily annotated page. "We need to chant this incantation," he said. "Everyone, repeat after me. Custodiant tenebras magicas, servat in nos ab umbris." They chanted in unison, their voices rising in volume and clarity. As the incantation echoed through the chamber, the tremors intensified, but the glowing symbols grew brighter, reinforcing the circle around the altar. The growl turned into a roar, and a shadowy figure began to materialize above the altar, thrashing against the containment field. The air grew thick with malevolent energy, pressing down on them. "Keep going," David urged, his voice straining. With a final forceful recitation of the incantation, the glow of the symbols exploded into blinding light. The shadow screamed, a sound that reverberated through their very bones, then vanished. The light slowly dimmed, leaving the chamber illuminated only by their lanterns once more. The oppressive feeling lifted, replaced by an overwhelming sense of calm. The stone altar cracked, the obsidian amulet now dark and lifeless, its power extinguished. "Did we do it?" Brian asked, his voice shaking. "I think so," David said, closing the journal with a sigh of relief. "The containment is secure again." The morning after, as dawn broke over Hollow Grove, the group emerged from the basement, physically and emotionally drained but triumphant. The once ominous mansion now felt eerily peaceful, the whispers and chills of its haunted past finally silenced. They sat together in the library, the morning light streaming through the windows. "We should let the town know what happened here," Jessica said. "And maybe it's time to put this place to rest." David nodded. "Hollow Grove has a dark history, but it doesn't have to define its future. We've made it safe again for now, but the knowledge we've gained must be preserved, in case the darkness ever returns." With a sense of resolution, they began to make plans to leave Hollow Grove behind. But they knew that in their hearts, the bonds forged in facing the unknown would tie them together forever. The mansion's secrets were once again locked away, the shadows held at bay by brave souls unwilling to let fear triumph over hope. And thus, the legend of the Hollow family and their hidden chamber became a chapter closed, but never forgotten.